That's a big-time play.
Pressured by Hutchinson, he goes down again.
All right, what's happening there, Lions fans? Welcome into Rockhound Detroit Lions. It is a 3:23 p.m. show. Sorry about being a little bit late. Not even sure if we're going to have a lot of people in today. It's not our normal time, but it's okay. A lot of you are going to watch it later. I have a special guest today, and he's going to fill us in on all of the offensive line goodies that you guys are going to want to know leading up to this draft for the Detroit Lions. Over the last 24 hours, there has been an outpouring of love for the Lions and the pick at 17 and Kadyn Proctor. And what's really going to happen, nobody knows. We're going to try to add some insight to that today with Mr. Jeff Dean and Sports Info Solutions. If you have not visited sportsinfosolutions.com, you should. And make sure you visit nfldraft.sportsinfosolutions.com and get the information that you need right now. Of course, do it after the show. Check them out. Follow along. Have them pulled up on the screen. Whatever you'd like to do today, we're going to run through 5, 7, 10 different offensive linemen, get Jeff's takes on a lot of different things, and we have some very unique, funny stories as well. Did I mention he's a Viking? He's a Viking. So very proud, very happy to have Mr. Jeff Dean on with us here today with Sports Info Solutions. Let's get it rolling. Good afternoon, sir. How are you today, Mr. Jeff Dean?
I'm doing well. How are you?
I'm doing good, man. Appreciate you guys, one, getting back with me and giving me the opportunity to have you on to discuss the offensive line today. Hopefully we'll be breaking down a lot of different positional groups as we go through the rest of the period before the draft here. I don't even know what you call it anymore, but it's like the period before the draft, the last few weeks, where everybody's scrambling for information, and you're going to give us some great information today. So, Jeff Dean, you are the lead NFL scout there at SIS Solutions. You've been there since 2018. Could you kind of give us a Cliff Notes version of what SIS is and what they do?
Yeah, absolutely. So we are a sports analytics company, essentially, at our core. So we do football, baseball, and basketball for the majority of our operation. And what we're looking for is for the football operation is in college and NFL games. We kind of break down what actually happens on the field, put into numerical data so that everybody can view that. So if you guys are wanting to know how players perform in the red zone or on third down or on receivers on in-breaking routes and all of those details you're trying to find on the game, that's what we're looking at. And then the other side is we are all massive NFL draft fans. And so we write up scouting reports and build an entire database and a website to share some of that knowledge that we would normally share with some of our clients with the public so that they can see how it works behind the scenes, kind of see how our grading scales work and stuff like that. Because when we're looking at players, we are trying to figure out what they're going to be at the next level, and that is not easy. So we have developed a system that we try to emulate NFL teams for. So we use a role-based scouting philosophy, which means that we're looking for players that fit specific roles. And based on that role that we think they're going to fit at the next level, that's the grade they're going to get. We have a draft matrix that's super cool. It's exactly how NFL teams will look at their entire board. They will see all the positions stacked against each other, and they can make decisions based on what kind of need they have and the value they have at those positions. So it's just a most exciting time of year for us personally. We love the season. There's a lot of great stuff that goes on the season, but these couple weeks before the draft give all us fans whose teams didn't perform how they expected a little more optimism going into the next year.
100%, man. I mean, this has always been like the Lions Super Bowl for me, being a Lions fan. You know, we always looked forward to the draft. It was the best time of the year. You know, you're getting to see who is going to take you to the Super Bowl next, which We've been saying that every year for 60 plus years. But anyway, I'll digress from that. So I've had a little bit of time to kind of go through the site now. I've been visiting it on a daily. I've been going through a lot of the scouting reports. I did not see that matrix that you're talking about yet that kind of shows you the vertical, or is it a horizontal stack of how these players are stacked against each other. Maybe we'll be able to look at that today. Let's just take a look at, your site right now. So what I pulled up here is I just went through to the big board and I slimmed it down. My screen's not going to behave with me. I slimmed it down with tackles, guards, and centers just to kind of give me a flow of top to bottom. So can you kind of just give us an overview of what I'm looking at right here on your big board, tackles, guards, and centers, why they're ranked the way that they are, and then there's also another number under the rank that says like OT1, OT2. So for those that don't know, could you kind of give them an idea what that means?
Yeah. So what you're looking at there is just those positions you talked about being isolated. So the rank there is the rank on the overall big board. So we have Kadyn Proctor, for instance, as our 11th ranked player across all positions, but according to the tackles, he's the second, which is why you have the OT2. So Mauigoa, OT1, the number one tackle on our board. Kadyn Proctor's the second one. Spencer Fano's the third. And then you have Iheanachor as the number one guard on our board. And so the rank you kind of see there with below it, the OT3, the OT5s, that's how they stack up against each other. Those are the most direct comparisons. The overall rank, to be honest, like the 61, the 72 you see, is honestly mostly for fans because they would like to see how they stack up against other position groups. But the draft matrix, which is also at the top of the screen, would allow you to kind of see that in kind of one big picture, and is a really kind of fun way to see how how a team will look at a horizontal board on the draft night.
So I'm going to pull up Mauigoa here. At least I pronounce it Maui. That could be totally wrong. I might have to play with the screen a little bit to make sure that this all lines up. But the first page that you see here, if you wouldn't mind, we'll run through it top to bottom a little bit. If you could just kind of walk us through, and I'll move it as you're speaking.
Sure. So at the top, we have his basic information. But one of the really cool parts that is unique to our site that you don't see very often is we also designate with injury risks very specifically. We have an injury department. We track every injury throughout their college and NFL careers, compile a database, and have experts look at this and determine if it's a long-term injury risk, if it's moderate or so. So a good example is when Tua was coming out of the draft, we flagged him as a high injury risk. And that's not just injured at the time, but based on the injuries he had in college, we projected a very high chance he had significant injury history in the NFL career. So you could see he's got a moderate risk right there. There is some injury risk that comes with this prospect. It goes between low, medium, high, or we don't have the information if they played like in the Division III and we don't have the full database.
What happens what happens if I click? Sorry, Jeff. What happens if I click on moderate risk? Does it click and bring me anywhere?
It'll take you to the glossary, which is a perfect way to read everything you might want to know shorthand about our operation and what we put into these reports. So we're going to be talking about defensive line moves, as you can see there. So when we talk about a bull rush, what we talk about, we're getting to get our grades, our trait grades, which are some of our most important things. I'll cover that more and when we get down into the report. But then we will also use a lot of shorthand, and this will help you identify that on the report. So when we say COD, that's change of direction ability. When we talk FBI, that is football intelligence, stuff like that. It gives a little more description on the stats as well, the lower you go. So when we get into personnel packages, we talk about how each team will operate with certain personnel. That's where that'll give you a little more information about it. So if you're an experienced football analyst, you go through this and you will still find unique, fun things. And if you are trying to find more about football and what you're looking at, this is a great resource for us.
So COD is not cash on demand. Got it. And FBI means we're not getting in trouble. I love it. So look, I wanted to just kind of briefly go through some of this. I know I kind of hit you with a curveball here, but I wanted to go through some of this because there's so much great information in here. And as someone that is still learning every single day of my life, I have learned a ton by going through your site and getting an idea of how you do things. at SIS is just, it's way different than what I've seen out there in the marketplace so far. Offensive line, since we're talking about that, I know we're going to be talking about like the BB percentage, like the blown block percentage. Will be in there when we go through some of these scouting profiles. And could you just explain a little bit how, I've never seen this done before. So could you explain why this is so important as to why we're looking at the bounce, the blown block percentage, the runs to the gap splits, all that stuff? You wouldn't mind just running through this real quick?
Absolutely. Great question. So blown block is our proprietary stat that we developed. And so to compare it to a fellow rival company, hypothetically, they have a win rate, which means how often a player gets around a guy. But their big flaw is there's no consequence needed for that. So if your backside tackle gets beat by somebody around him, doesn't affect the play, but your offensive line's punished. With our stats, there has to be a negative consequence. So if you have a high blown block rate, not only did you make a bad block, you got beat quickly, effectively, it negatively impacted the play, which is why you're going to see our numbers, the bad blown block percentage is 5%, because 1 out of 20 plays that you are blocking and you directly have a negative impact on the play is not good. So we want to see offensive linemen with very low blown block rates. Ideally, it's harder on the tackle positions because they have a lot of speed coming from the end. It's a little easier on the interior because you're going to have less area to operate. So we would expect guards and centers to have just a slightly natural lower blown block percentage. Bounce rate basically means every run has a design gap and an actual gap. So we track where the run is intended and then where it actually goes. And sometimes that is because the defense creates penetration. Sometimes it's because a running back just decides to go to the outside. But once we start stacking these different stats we're tracking on every play, if we know the offensive lineman made a bad block and there was a bounce outside of it, we know that one of the reasons for the bounce, at least, was the offensive line's blocking. So we want to see a lower bounce percentage, but there are other factors that factor in there. And the other big one I want to highlight here is total points. Total points is our flagship stat. This is how we take what happens on the field and give credit to every single player on the field. So EPA, for those of you that know a little bit more about advanced analytics, basically takes your expected points you're expected on one play, what happens on that play to the next play, and takes the difference. What total points does is it takes that little piece and assigns it to all 22 players on the field, some positive, some negative, based on their stats on the play. So if you have a running back who breaks a tackle for a 10-yard gain, that's a better play by the running back than a 10-yard gain with no contact. And the defender is going to be punished for helping allow that. The offensive lineman on certain bounce rates is going to get docked or credited based on what happens. So we track somewhere in the neighborhood of probably 150 data points on every single play in some capacity. And all of those data points factored together gives us a full, complete, and hopefully accurate picture of what actually happens.
Wow. I mean, that is just like the very, small percentage of what you guys have done and how you're different. And the one thing that I really like about what you said is, having that negative impact on the play and how that affects, as opposed to, what you're saying about the blown block percentage. I mean, that to me sounds like you're actually attributing more to the play than just what happened on other sites, right? And how they factor that in there. Let's get right back into the big board here. I'm just going to kind of run down your board, I guess, just one. If you want to stop me anywhere and just maybe explain why a player's in a certain player, and then we'll spend 2 minutes on this, and we'll jump right into the offensive line. Jeremiah Love at number 1. I put him at number 1 too. I've seen a lot of other sites have Fernando Mendoza there. And I think that we're very similar here, that I personally believe you want to rank the best football player overall. And when I look at Jeremiah Love, he is going to be an impact player, I think, from day one. And I think, like you mentioned earlier, off air, like he's going to be one of the best running backs in the league in a short window of time. I firmly believe that, and I think that he's immediately going to impact whatever team lands Jeremiah Love. But walk us through, I guess, maybe we'll just kind of scan through the first 10, 20, and you can stop me wherever you want, talk about, a player maybe you have different than others.
Okay. Let's go to Jordan Tyson, number 9. I like Jordan Tyson a lot. So Jordan Tyson is our 9th ranked player regardless of position, our number one wide receiver. This is strictly on-field football ability. When you watch him play, there's going to be people that have him as their number 1 to 2 to 3 receiver based on what they say, but they want to knock him down the draft board based on his injury risk. So this board does not factor that in. That's what the designation right up there says. He is a high risk for recurring injuries at the next level. So teams will factor that in. So we don't expect him necessarily to go 9th. He might, but because of all the other things with him, that's what affects the draft value. Draft value and actual ability are not always directly correlated. So he kind of had a little bit of a underwhelming season based on his 2024 film because of injuries. But what we see is a NFL receiver who threw up 26 reps on the bench press, by the way. I don't think that should go unnoticed, and is just solid across the board. He has almost no weaknesses. It was really difficult when evaluating him as trying to find the areas on the field where he can't make an impact. So, we go from the overview to the scouting report. It breaks it down. So we have the overall, which kind of gives you a little bit of his background, his athletic ability, some injury history. Pass game, which is going to be the vast majority for a receiver, is kind of how he operates. My style, I like to start from the beginning of the snap through the play. So I'll usually do the release, then the footwork off of that, the route, and then work to the hands from there. The run game, we do want to talk about his blocking ability and if he has value as a runner. Again, for a receiver, we're not expecting much here, but he does offer he is going to be asked to block, so we need to know what that is. And then finally, the last word. If you want to read somewhere in the neighborhood of 100 to 125 words on a player and figure out what you should think about him, that's probably where I would start. Obviously, read the whole report if you want a full, complete picture, but that will give you our projection, we think he's going to do with the NFL, the role he's going to fill, and kind of maybe a little bit of his projection on how teams can use him as well.
Gotcha. Man, there's just so much info, and I'm going to throw one at you here because if I'm scanning through this, the player that I don't see, so Mansour Delane obviously belongs, in my opinion, the best corner in this draft. I don't think anyone's going to argue that, but you have Colton Hood here above, where is he? Jermad McCoy. Yeah, by a wide margin, and I, too, believe this. Could you tell us why? Do you know why he's up that high versus Jermad McCoy? I don't know if you did this one or not.
I did watch Colton Hood and wrote up this report. So we'll start with him.
Perfect.
So I like to talk about the positives when it comes to a player more than the negatives. He has NFL size. He is just built to attack the football. When he plants and explodes forward, he is really quick and decisive. He's aggressive at the catch point. He's sticky in man coverage, are my strengths there. If you look at it and you follow up with his testing numbers, he's athletic. He has everything you're looking for. Now, there is a lot of reports out there I've seen on Colton Hood specifically that love his run defense. I think it's a little bit more of his projection on a run defense, to be honest. When you watch him right now, I don't see someone that comes up and just wants to make an impact. It's more he will if the opportunity is there, but he doesn't actively seek it out, which is a little bit of his difference. But some of the important things you need for a corner, you have to be fast. There are no slow corners in the NFL because they don't exist. So with a 7 play speed, that means not just how fast he's in a straight line, that's how quickly he reacts to the play, how quickly he can change directions. It is what he actually does. So a 7 for us, it's a 1 through 9 scale. A 7 for us means he is very good. So if you ever hear on a scouting report somebody says the words very good, that's a 7. And a 7 play speed means he is going to excel at that at the next level. A 6 is a good NFL, which means compared to NFL players, you are good. 7 is very good. So when we talk about his play speed, his closing speed, his special teams ability, all being 7s, those are really impressive traits. He does have a little bit of 4s, which means that there are areas we'd want to see a little bit improved. He is mediocre, slightly below average at this time, but it doesn't mean he can't develop there. So Colton Hood has the potential to be a lockdown corner. I was really impressed with his aggressiveness. He was able to stick with players in man's coverage, which is never easy. And then he was able to kind of plant and drive when asked.
I absolutely love it, man. You guys have such a wealth of knowledge about all the players, and I'm glad that we just went through this because it's not that you do just offensive line. Jeff Dean does it all, and being the lead scout for SIS, he's involved in everything that you see here on this site, and his name's everywhere. When you start reading the scouting reports, you're going to see his name there. So now, if you don't mind, I'd like to switch gears just briefly. I got to get this story back out of you. I have to. Before we jump into the offensive line, let's get these people laughing a little bit. You were telling me a story off air about Jahmyr Gibbs. Now, if I didn't say this before, Jeff's in Minnesota. He's a Vikings fan. And so you were telling me this story about Kwesi Adolfo and how the Jahmyr Gibbs was like their number one choice. They really wanted Jahmyr Gibbs, or at least could you tell us that story? Tell the fans this story because I thought it was just hilarious. I loved it, and I think it would get everybody smiling today.
Yeah, so I'll just say, and this is a firsthand knowledge from somebody that was in the room. Hopefully he doesn't get in trouble for this, but leading up to the draft, the Vikings really wanted Jahmyr Gibbs. That was their number one target. That was who they were going to replace Dalvin Cook with. They were really excited, and so as NFL teams do, they will do a bunch of their own internal mock drafts using analytics and probabilities to figure out who's available. And every single time, Jahmyr Gibbs was there for the Vikings to take, and they drafted him. And their GM, Kwesi, got really upset and was yelling. And he's like, why is this happening? In the analytics department's like, there's a 99% chance he's there. Like, this is the player it's going to happen. And so they were going forward to the draft, expecting Jahmyr Gibbs to be there. And then the Lions took him at the draft, and their running back coach just walks out of the room and shakes his head, and there's like, now we don't know what to do. And they kind of panicked and traded down, got hosed in that trade, and the rest is history. So, never trust analytics 100% because there is always the human element that will disrupt it.
I'll never turn down a story of how the Vikings finished behind the Lions at least one time. So that was a good one, man. I appreciate that. And yeah, Gibbs was the right choice. They had it right. He was the right choice. Man, what a great story. All right, let's get into offensive line. That's why we're here. We're going to break down a little bit, or Jeff's going to break down the offensive line. And, in the email that I had sent you, I kind of wanted to go through, I guess, really the top, your top 10 or top 5 or top 6 players. But let's start with the overall consensus of the offensive line. How would you compare this year's class to even the last couple of, drafts, 24, 25? Where does it rank? Because I get the feeling that when I've gone through it, I only see a couple of true left tackles that I absolutely love. There's a couple of right tackles that I feel like are good, but, there's maybe one that's really good. There's a guard that's really good. But outside of like 5 or 6 guys, I feel like it's a weak class overall. How do you feel about that? And how would you compare it to the last couple of drafts?
Yeah, I and our team feel it is a weaker class than the last couple. And there's a couple external factors at play. High-end tackles are really valuable, not just in the NFL, but in college. And so teams are able to pay these players more now to stay there. So you're not getting the same just volume of players that are anxious to get to the NFL. They're staying. Now, the best ones still go, of course, but you do happen to have a few players every year that you're surprised do come back. So I think just your pool to start off is limited, but the players that are also at the top this year, all of them probably, except maybe one of them, has 1 or 2 traits that are throwing people off, right? So we'll talk about them specifically, but, Kadyn Proctor is over 350 pounds. That's not a trait you normally see at that position, and doesn't always get back quickly, and so that's a concern. The Utah 2 offensive linemen, one of them, Lomu, they're not sure if he's has the arm length to stay on the outside and may have to kick to the interior. Some of the other ones you kind of have the top are really athletic, like Monroe Freeling or Iheanachor, but again, they're not always as proven either. So you kind of have a lot of unique one-off prospects this year, and that's kind of throwing, I think, the general population off. I think the NFL teams will identify these as value, and I do still expect, I would say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I would expect at least 6 probably 7 offensive linemen to go in the first round still, with all those, with maybe the exception of Ione out of Penn State being tackles. So I still expect the same amount of tackles to go. I just think that teams are going to have to pick and choose the specific one. I don't think there's as much consensus on everybody's 1 through 5 this year.
So did you say you felt that there would be 7 offensive linemen that went in the first round?
Yes.
Okay, and that includes the guard.
Correct.
And the rest are tackles.
Yes.
Okay. I guess so with that, I mentioned that I felt like there's maybe 2 top tier left tackles in this class. Kadyn Proctor's one for me. And he's been on my list since December. Like, he was my main choice for the Lions. But if you could walk us through the top tackles in this class, top left tackles, true left tackles in this class, who would they be? How many are there really in the first round per se out of that 7?
So our top tackle, Maui, you got in my head now. Mauigoa. I might be totally butchering that too.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, you're all right. He's our number 1 tackle, our 5th overall player. We do see him more as a right tackle, though. And that's kind of what I think is starting off this process, is we think the best tackle in the draft is probably better at playing right tackle, who can maul the players in front of him. But he kind of struggles with his pad level. He's not as effective in space. So we're looking for him to kind of just overwhelm at that first level. Kadyn Proctor is our number 2 tackle, which is not always the consensus. We have him as our 11th ranked player, and this is a massive boom or bust prospect. So he is really big, 6'7", 352 pounds, and extremely athletic. I love college wrestlers, high school wrestlers, by the way, when it comes to offensive line.
Mm-hmm.
So him coming out of Iowa and initially committing out of Iowa, I thought was a great move, and then he switched to Alabama. But he's been a guy for a while that just has struggled to put together 5 or 6 games in a row where he just overwhelms everybody, right? Because he's going to walk out and be the biggest, most athletic guy out there, and it doesn't always show up. And so personally, I'm banking that this is enough, and what I've seen is enough that he will translate to the next level, but there is risk. He's also definitely more of a left tackle in my mind. I think he could work as a right tackle. I don't think there's any issue with that. But with that kind of size and athleticism and ability to dominate certain times at the game is just something that teams value more at the left tackle position, and that's where they're going to use him. So he is overwhelmingly powerful, and that's kind of where I would lean for those top 2 players at least.
So that was Mauigoa and Kadyn Proctor is kind of 1-2 there. And so with Kadyn Proctor, and we'll get into more specifics in a minute. When I actually had an opportunity I stopped him in the hallway at the combine and I spoke to him for a couple of minutes. He had mentioned that a few of the NFL teams had discussed moving him to guard, moving him to interior. And my direct question is, like, are you willing to do it? Like, is that something that you want to do? And of course he said no, he's played on the left his whole life. That's where he wants to play. But he gave the right answer, and that was, I just want to play football. I just, wherever I'm at on the field, I'm going to do it. And I thought that was a phenomenal answer. But could you explain maybe if a team did move him to guard, what are they seeing? Is it just not ready to be a left tackle, or maybe they're bringing him in thinking left tackle of the future? Let's kind of welcome him a little bit, kind of get used to the flow. Get him, baptized as a guard, and then move him outside. Maybe they're thinking they got a guy that's going to retire soon. We're just going to bring him in, get him ready. What would be your thought process as a GM if you were going to bring in Kadyn Proctor and put him in at guard?
So teams don't look to start a player guard and make him work harder and then to move out to tackle. Usually it's the other way around. You try to start them at tackle because that's the most valuable offensive line position, and work inside if you don't think they can do it. So if you're considering moving him to guard, you're most likely determining you don't think he's going to be a tackle really at any point unless you absolutely need a body. I think that the main concern is lack of foot quickness on his vertical sets and his dropbacks. If he's going in speed rushers on the outside, he has a tough time reaching them with his foot quickness. And part of that's just his weight. It takes a lot of momentum to move 352 pounds back against NFL caliber athletes on the edge. So I think he can do it. I think, honestly, he's getting closer to his ideal weight. I think he played this year at 366. So he lost 14 pounds during the season or postseason for this draft process. So I think he's trending in the right direction. I would probably still like to get him under 350 a little bit. I don't think he's ever going to lack for anchor or power. And so when you have that kind of spare ability, that's where you put in the speed. But I think if teams are going to look for him as a guard, they're hoping that he is just going to maul the player in front of him, but they have most likely decided they don't want him as a tackle at the next level.
Does he have enough foot quickness? Outside from setting, does he have enough foot quickness to get out in a gap scheme, do you think? I mean, I know both of his efficiency ratings in gap and in zone were fairly consistent, but I mean, do you see him being able to get out a little bit in a zone scheme and do some work there?
Yeah, he has true offensive line versatility when it comes to the scheme. His athleticism and his size make him really valuable in either scheme, because either you're going to put him in a power scheme where if you want him as a seal blocker, he's not going to get moved. He's going to hold up on that end. And if you want to pull him, he absolutely has the foot fluidity. It's kind of, that's why I would describe it. He looks comfortable running at 350 pounds, which is amazing. He had carries at Alabama. He was lined out as like a receiver at Alabama. He really is a true dancing bear kind of stereotype. And then when it comes to a zone scheme, he doesn't have he doesn't look like he'd be able to work to the second level efficiently, but honestly, that's one of his strengths. And I love his ability to work from the first level quickly, get to the second level, square up somebody much smaller than him, and be able to take him out of the equation. So I think he's got the ability to work in either set. And especially as a run blocker, that's where he's going to shine in either of those sets.
Makes sense. I kind of envision the same thing for Kadyn Proctor. I think he's just too unique of a prospect. He was he was at 348 the day that I spoke to him. He was at 348 that morning or the day before, and then he weighed in at 352 at the combine. So he's worked his butt off. I don't know if you've seen the Instagram workout with Kadyn, but man, he moves different. And I know that, like you were saying, there's some worry about the speed and getting into his set quick enough. But he's got such a wide radius that, it feels like if his feet lack a little bit and his hands start to catch, he's going to pick up some penalties for holding, especially as a rookie. But once he gets in you, man, it's hard for anyone to get away from him. But to your point, he was beat with speed early at 2023. I think he was at 390 and touched 400 pounds in 2023. And since then, he had a lot of questions on if he could even play SEC football. Like you said, he was going back to Iowa and then came back to Alabama 3 months later, and they never looked back, man. He's never looked back. So let's start going down the list. I gave you a top 10 kind of O-line graded review, whether it's top 5 or top 10, left tackles, guards, centers, right tackles, wherever they rank. Well, we can see where your system ranks them, and kind of just give us, strengths, weaknesses, potential position changes if they exist, and or the best position fits, and then maybe talk a little bit of teams here where they may belong. We know that the Lions need offensive line, whether that's Penei Sewell going to the left or staying at the right side. So maybe we'll give you a chance here to tell us who might be the best fit there for the Lions at 17 if they stick and pick. Would you like to start with Mr. Francis Mauigoa?
Sure, let's do it.
All right, let's start with Mauigoa. That is your number 1 overall rated offensive tackle there, ranked number 5 overall in the big board. Let me get this brought up here. Again, I might have to mess with my screen a little bit. 329 pounds, 6'5.5" I love the Samoans on the offensive line. I don't know why, but man, they know what they're doing there. I guess walk us through, top to bottom, the biggest things about Francis Mauigoa. Just pitch me the scouting report. I guess if I were a GM, like what were you going to tell me about Mauigoa and why I should take him in the top 10 of this year's draft?
Absolutely. So one of the things I really like is right under our grade, we give you, instead of just if you memorizing a bunch of numbers, we'll tell you right there what we think he is. So we think he's a strong starter. If you're drafting this player, that's what we expect him to be day 1, year 2. We don't evaluate these players on their absolute best or their absolute worst. We value what we think they're going to be day 1, year 2, which is why some of these prospects that have a little higher developmental ceiling aren't getting quite the same grades, because we think it's going to take more time. When it comes to Mauigoa, though, absolutely ready to play day one. He has all pro upside if we were willing to develop him, but he has strong hands. He is a nasty finisher. He is tough. He works to the second level. He's not as good outside of his immediate range, so I wouldn't want him pulling out to the perimeter too often or trying to kind of get outside of his comfort area. But what he does well is just take the guy in front of him and then make him no longer a problem for the offense. At Miami, he played a lot of really good edge rushers in that college football playoff. We saw him against a lot of good edge rushers, and he consistently held up. Unlike some of these other prospects too, he has 33-inch arms, which is one of those numbers that just NFL teams like. They want 33-plus inch arms, and the reason for that is to keep defenders out of their chest. If you have shorter arms, it's harder to engage with these defenders that have 34, 35-inch arms, which you will occasionally see. So that's one of the reasons teams like to keep him on the outside as well. It's just kind of one of those immediate numbers. And then he was just dominant this year. Our metrics back it up too. Our metrics are not always correlated to NFL draft success at all. There are definitely schemes that matter and stuff, but for a player that just dominated at a high level against top competition, you can see he's got a 5 in range, which means he's sufficient, but he is good or very good at everything else. We love his run blocking ability specifically. He's a strong hand use. He is powerful. He can finish, and he's tough. So he's going to be somebody that's going to go in and immediately impact a running game in a massive way, and then will be still a reliable starter as a pass blocker as well.
So we talked earlier about the blown block percentage, and I believe you said that the cap on that was 5%, and you want to see a low percentage. His percentage is 1.5%, and he has the 5th rank overall from all of the offensive linemen, or is that 5th rank overall with all players of his blown block percentage? And if you wouldn't mind just kind of explaining, again, blown block percentage in this use case, and then the run behind percentage and that ranking on why that matters.
Yeah, so I believe that number is just offensive tackles, because we do want to separate, because again, they're much different comparisons at those numbers. So you can see down there we have blown block pass, rush, and then overall. So starting with the pass, 1.2%. All the tackles on our draft site, he is the 2nd lowest blown block pass percentage, and that is extremely impressive. Number one, it's a low number. It means 1.2% of pass plays on the season he was beaten and negatively affected the play. So on a pass play, that's pretty easy. That means he either gave a sack or a pressure. Now that can be a late hit, that can be a hurry before it, but it's going to be quick, it's going to be intentional, and it is going to be a block we expect him to make. So it's not some crazy blitzing linebacker that we don't expect him to reach. It's a block he should have made. That 2nd rank too is against all schemes. So that is teams that throw a lot, don't throw very much, teams that never face tough competition. 1.2% on a player like that is really strong. Now we can see his rush blown block percentage is higher at 1.9, and that's 18th among tackles, but it's still kind of under our 2% threshold of the high end on college. And it's a team that ran a lot and ran behind him not very often, which means that he didn't have a lot of opportunities to destroy players running at him. He was more that backside guy preventing the fast players when working around. So 1.9% is not incredible, but it doesn't mean he doesn't have the traits to do that at the next level. And then finally, the one that really matters because it weights them based on how many snaps, 1.5% overall, number 5 among tackles. And again, this is against all players. So there are some schemes. Utah, for instance, had a very tackle-friendly scheme because their quarterback's fast, can get out of the pocket. They move the pocket a lot. Miami was much more of a traditional drop-back team. So they saw NFL-level reps. So overall, when we're looking at these numbers, we're seeing somebody who was a really strong pass blocker in college. But then when we watch the film, what we really see is somebody who excels as a run blocker and can hold up as a pass blocker. We just, those numbers may not sound like they match up, but it doesn't mean that one contradicts the other.
So a couple of things I want to pull out from there. According to another site, Mauigoa had 557 pass block reps. And so his pass block blown rate was, on the pass, 1.2%. 1.2%. 2%, which would be only 6.7 plays all season. He had a blown pass block. That's pretty incredible.
We do have the totals for you under the stats page if you want. So, yeah, we have...
under the stats page. Where's the stats page here?
So if you scroll up to the top and then hit the stats on the right there.
There we go.
And then if you go to blown block, the tabs, we do everything for you.
Look at that. So we didn't even go through this. There's a whole level of, you got blocking, blown blocks, scheme splits, when he's run behind, and then his combine information, which I forgot to talk about this because this blew me away. This is exactly what I'm looking for when I've gone to other sites. Like, why all of this is just not in a row like that, where I can just quickly get to it and find all the information that I'm looking for. This is why you need to go to sportsinfosolutions.com and get all of your NFL information today. I love it, man. So we'll go back to blown blocks. You were going to explain it.
Yeah. So you can see right there, we give the blown blocks for pressure and sacks separately, just so you can see how many sacks he gave up directly as a result of the blown block. So it doesn't mean in his guy maybe only got 2, but he gave up 4 for pressure. 2 of those were sacks for a total of 6 on the year. He had 9 run blocking, blown blocks for a total of 15 there. And you can also see how he did, over the course of the years. So he actually increased his blown block run percentage and drastically decreased his pass. But again, that's a little bit of scheme, position too, and all that stuff that factors in.
Let me make sure I understand this. So blown block pressures, he gave up 4 pressures that were from a blown block. And then he gave up 2 sacks that were from a blown block.
Yep.
And then he had 9 blown blocks that were in the run game or on a run-specific play. And then he had a total of 15 blown blocks all season.
Correct. So on those run ones, what we are looking for is usually contact behind the line of scrimmage, because he was beaten. So it's not just any contact. You actually have to be beaten in position, force a broken missed tackle, but you can also force the running back to change directions drastically. And that'll count. That could count there too. But again, every play we look at it several times from several different perspectives. So we are not casually giving these blown blocks out if they're not earned. So these are audited and comb through to make sure that we try to get the most accurate information we can.
I love it, man. It's great stuff. What else do you want to get to on Mauigoa? And then I've got a question based on something that you just mentioned. Is there anything else you want to touch on your scouting report, the overview, the stats look, anything else we need to touch on with him to drive home why he's your top-rated tackle?
I think the final thing I would say is just his reliability. If you go to his blocking over the last 3 seasons, he's played over 2,700 snaps on the offensive line. That was in the stats section for blocking. He's played over 2,700 snaps. Very reliable. You're not going to be starting at Miami for 3 straight years if you don't earn the coach's trust early. And so we like to see players that have a high snap count year after year in the same system. That means that you build kind of reliability. What we want to see in then is better production. And that's what we did see out of him too. So we also thought he got a lot better in his college days. And that is good information that we hope that he can continue in the next level.
Awesome, man. Great information here. I do have a question for you based on something that you just mentioned, and that was scheme friendly. And I'm going to give you the Detroit Lions version here, because when you talk about scheme friendly and you look at certain teams, whether it's the Chicago Bears, they have Caleb Williams. Well, they might have more of a scheme friendly system, right? They have a quarterback that can run around and throw it. Jared Goff is pure pocket passer. Yeah, he can move a little bit, but he's not escaping. Like that's not what he's trying to do. It's not what he's back there for. Does that mean that the Lions are looking for a more specific style of an offensive lineman where other teams might use, and I'm going to ask you this question, do the Lions need more of an offensive lineman that can, stick to their assignment and not have to move around a whole bunch just to be able to protect Jared Goff? Or do they need a player like a Monroe Freeling that maybe is a little bit more agile, depending on who you are and what you think about him, that can also move around the pocket, then also move in the run game? How do you view that for an NFL team looking at an offensive lineman? Is it the scheme that you're trying to bring this offensive lineman in, or is it the player and the play style that you're trying to bring the player in?
The unsatisfying answer, I think it's a little bit of both. It really depends. I would say the run game, I would factor scheme in more than the pass game. So when it comes to a player like Kadyn Proctor, let's just take him because we were talking about him earlier. For the Lions specifically, he is going to be a massive addition to an already good run game. We, by the way, wrote up Sewell as a left tackle, a Pro Bowl caliber left tackle when he came out of the draft. So we believe he could easily move over. And then you put Kadyn Proctor at right tackle if you want. You have two massive tackles that are going to go down the field. And then as a pass protector, you can find ways to help your players out and put them in the best situation. So if you know he's a little he struggles a little bit with speed rushers, that's where you have a tight end chip the edge rusher on his side, or the running back chip on before he releases into his route. So it's not a total deal breaker, especially as a pass pro guy. What I would say is when you're looking at a more traditional drop back like Jared Goff, you just really have to have sound footwork. So if you're going to take somebody like Proctor, he has to develop that footwork quickly, because that vertical set, his ability to kind of drop and hold off that edge and prevent anybody from getting around it, has to be there early in his career, because he's not going to have a quarterback that can escape. And that's also where you have a lot of injury risk if you're giving up those hits on that side. So I would say the development matters a little bit more than the actual scheme when it comes to the passing.
Great information. Well, next up, I guess we'll just go right to Kadyn Proctor. Now, we've already discussed him, a little bit. I guess if you wouldn't mind finishing him off, anything else you want to add to his overview, where would you like me to start?
So I would go down to his positional factors a little bit. So in the critical factors, we'll do the critical factors first. So these are essentially the three factors we feel at this position they're consistent for the offensive tackles that matter the most for. We want to judge on reactive athleticism. So it's not just athleticism; it's how do you react to what's going on. So an offensive tackle has to mirror what the edge rusher is attacking him with. A cornerback has to react to how the receiver is jab stepping him. That's where this comes in. So we think he is a good reactive athlete. He can move his feet a lot better than you would expect somebody at his size and stay in front of fast players. A 7 anchor and play strength. He is extremely strong. You do not run through him without and multiple players probably coming at him. He is built like a house. And then finally, his body control. Again, when you have somebody that big, being able to move your body is not easy at all. And the fact that he makes it look so effortless at times is a really good indicator. And then we'll get into the positional factors. And the one that really stands out is his power at an 8. There are only a few players in this entire draft cycle that have an 8 anywhere. We expect him to be one of the most powerful offensive linemen in the NFL within the first couple of years. That's what that essentially means. He is going to be extremely powerful. This means that if you have a player in front of him, he can move him vertically or laterally, depending on the scheme you're running, and you don't have to throw other bodies at him. It means he's also going to do this against basically everybody he comes up against. If you have like a 6 power, or you might be able to manhandle some of the smaller players in front of you, but you're not going to do it consistently. I would expect Kadyn Proctor to be able to be powerful and an impact blocker against just about any defensive lineman he's going against.
I'm probably not going to get this number right, but I want to say that Kadyn Proctor had 90 pancake blocks last year. Does that sound familiar to you?
So we do not track pancake blocks because there's a variety of levels. I have found that when people track pancakes, they usually say anytime their defender falls on the ground, and that could be tripping and stuff like that. So we didn't track that, but we did track blown blocks. And you can see on his numbers, his blown block pass percentage is not nearly as good as his run. So it's going to be the stats at the top. And if you look at those numbers, so we just looked at Mauigoa, right? He had under a 1.2% this last year. In his 3 years overall, he's had a 4.1% blown block rate. He gets beat on the outside on a pass pro, which is why some teams might want to move him to guard. He is a very good run blocker, though, unlike Mauigoa, at least the blown blocks wise. 0.9% career as a freshman, sophomore, and junior. So this is where you see that big discrepancy on what do you do with him, because he is a dominant run blocker and the metrics back it up. He struggles to get back with his foot quickness, and the metrics back that up as well. So it's a projection. Again, he gave up 9 sacks in 2023 on his
Yep.
blown blocks, he has reduced that to 5 over the last 2 years. So it has gotten better, but definitely a concern still.
So I want to say again, going off of memory here, I was looking him up yesterday, and I think it was Alabama's website that had he had not recorded a sack in 12 games, and I think it was between the Florida Gators game and then like the last game of the season or something like that in 2025. But it was 12 games in between, and then his freshman year, obviously he was mentally exhausted. He had a very rough freshman season. And I think the overall number was 12 sacks that he had given up in his freshman season, and that's why he entered the transfer portal. Is he didn't know if he could do it, and then he decided, you know what, I can do it. I'm going to go back. I'm going to finish what I started, and he did. And I think that he had a great career at Alabama. And I think the one thing we can't forget is he went up against the best of the best of the best when it came to defensive lines and pass rush. And if he can do that at the rate that he's doing it here, yeah, I would be a little bit concerned here with your blown block percentage, which is a new number for us to understand because no one else that I've seen is doing that. But can it be cleaned up? And I think the one part of the conversation has been, okay, just move him to right tackle. Does it really matter in the NFL if you move a player to right tackle versus left tackle? And I want to get your opinion on this because today you're seeing teams address offensive lines differently. 15 years ago, it was left tackle was your highest paid guy in the offense next to the quarterback, and there's a reason for it. It's protecting your blind side of the quarterback. Now you're seeing defenses say, okay, you're going to have, we can't go at your left tackle, but we're going to send everybody down to the right tackle now where we think you're weaker, and we're going to attack you at your weak point. So offenses are now having to have two very stable offensive tackles on both sides of the football. Does it even really help if you move a guy like Proctor? Let's say he does struggle in pass set to move to the right side. How does it not be in the blind side? The quarterback can see it coming. How does that change things? Does it change things at all? And does it help moving him to right tackle versus left?
So I think the value of the right tackle has gone up over the last 15 years. Absolutely. I think for the exact reasons you've said, people have decided, hey, if I can attack you from the other side, why wouldn't I just move my best defender to that? The biggest hurdle to why there is still that gap, though, is the lag time. The coaches now have still grown up with that left tackle mindset. The offensive coordinators and defensive coordinators still have to try to change all their thinking. And then the quarterback's vision hasn't changed. When they are still viewing the players on the right side, they can see the defenders quicker. They can identify the players. So when you move a guy to the right side, it's less about the matchups on the defense, and it's more about the time the quarterback takes to identify the players in front of him versus the players he can't see. So if you put a player on the right side, even if he's beat, the quarterback can identify him quicker, assuming you have a right-handed quarterback. Mm-hmm. And that's really what they're seeing. So you could put him on the right side. I don't think that's going to fix many of the issues. I would say if you're going to do that, what you're hoping for is that you are still going to be a right side heavy team. I would expect if he gets moved to the right, you see a high amount of runs going to the right, and that the quarterback can have the vision on him and maybe throw a few extra tight ends on the right side of the line in that scenario. But I think that he has what it takes to be on the left tackle. Okay. Not to mention, NFL teams don't think like fans. They value size and athleticism more than fans by a mile. Mm-hmm. That's why you're going to see a couple other guys that are just athletic freaks go way higher than their traits would, their production and film would suggest. And because every NFL team thinks that they can develop those skills, this is a classic example. If he is on the board with the 20th overall pick, I would be shocked. And I've seen most mock drafts have him going somewhere in the 20 to 28 range. Some have obviously had him going earlier, but I think he's going to go definitely a lot earlier than most mock drafts would have him going.
I would agree. I really can't see him getting past 17 unless something else is there. My goodness, if Oliver Vegagnoni were to be there, I mean, I couldn't imagine that the Lions wouldn't want to have, some of the best guards in the NFL on their offensive line. Okay. I think that Proctor is a great fit for the Lions. You sound like you're confident he can still do this at the next level, given the blown block, pass set problems that he's had. I would assume some of that's going to get cleaned up as well. Maybe he drops another 10 pounds. Maybe he doesn't. But if he's at 350, the one thing we have seen is that trajectory has kind of gone down from where he was to where he is now. He was really heavy as a freshman. He's gotten in much better shape now, through his junior season, and we've seen the numbers get better. I would assume that is going to lend to the next level. Yeah, you're going to have a tough rookie year, but once you get through that rookie year, he should have a bounce back, hopefully after the sophomore season, of getting his body, continually in better shape. That's what I'm looking for. And that's how you said it too, right? Earlier, you grade players on where they are. Was it year 2? Is it, how say that
Day
one more
1,
time?
year 2.
Day 1, year 2 is how you're looking at players. That is a great way to look at this. I like it. I like it. Who do you want to go to next that is on your board here for offensive line?
Let's see. You got some good options at this offensive line. You know what? Let's do a really volatile one. Iheanachor, Arizona State. Sound like a plan?
All right, that sounds great. And I really like this kid, man. Watching him at the I think that was the Panini Bowl that I watched him at. Really, really impressed with the way he just ran down the field and opened up lanes everywhere. Mm-hmm. Where is he at on this board?
He is going to be, I think he's OT 8 right now. So 101. Just keep going just a tiny bit.
101. We were almost there.
So I will say we are in the process of tweaking our board based on a few things we've had. So he's going to go up, not a drastic amount, and he's going from like OT tackle 8 to 7, but it is a little bit of a bump from him. It'll be a pretty big drastic one on the board. So there are some big keys we need to identify with this guy right off the bat. So number one, he picked up football very late. He did not start playing football until his freshman year at East Los Angeles College, which means he's only been playing football 5 years. That means he has a lot to learn. Even little things that some teams might take for granted, you may have to start with that on him. But you don't see his NFL frame often. 6'6", 321 in a good-looking 321. There's no bad weight really with them. With almost 34-inch arms, those are tough. 34-inch arms to throw up a bench press 25 times is very difficult. So he's strong. You could see from those numbers that we highlight, dark orange means that they are near the top, explosive lower body. You can see that on the film, which is great. The biggest thing for him is just going to be consistency. He looks lost at times. He kind of struggles to identify what's developing in front of him, kind of how he should attack the second level. His pass pro footwork, it's really fast, but it's still a work in progress. He has time where he'll overset and he'll lunge and he'll reach when he just needs to just trust his footwork and drop back. And his hand timing and placement is definitely one of the biggest issues for me. But what he has that very few other people have in this draft is a day one NFL frame and athleticism, and teams will overlook that. So you can see his grades are not nearly as high as some of the other prospects we've talked about, but he will likely go at the end of day one or very early day 2. But I think he sneaks into the first round. He has time to get better. He also is a moderate injury risk. One thing to note is he missed some time in college with injuries, and he played through injuries. He actually had a torn labrum for 2 years at Arizona State and played through it. So very tough player, but did have a couple different injuries sneak up. So that is something teams will have to evaluate on their own and figure out if it's going to be something they can overlook. But when he sets his anchor, he's just a naturally strong player. He has the foot quickness you want on that position. He's going to be a really interesting draft prospect because we think he's more of a 3 to 4 year project, which is why he's not graded as high as some of our other ones. Even though if you were to look at him from a 4 year window, he might go up on that scale.
So you mentioned the word project. I'm going to circle back to that word in a minute. I don't want to forget that. Let me write that down. And it's in a different sense than a Iheanachor, but let's roll to his stats for a minute. If you could kind of walk us through, let's take a look at some blown blocks. It looks like he's made massive leaps and bounds from where he started in 2023 to where he ended in 2025. And then you also mentioned how he battled for a couple years, torn labrums. Obviously, that's going to hinder someone's playability, but this is a player that has, 4 or 5 years of football experience in total? Mm-hmm. And so where you've watched him grow from being a basketball player to now taking his first snaps at the college rank 3 seasons ago, right? So I think it was 3 seasons ago, 3 years ago, 2023. So he had 2 years of high school. Is that it?
So he played at, I don't know if he even played in high school. I'm looking at it.
He went JUCO route, didn't he?
Yeah, he played 2 years at JUCO and then went to Arizona State from there because he was a basketball player at there, and he was convinced to try out for the football team after they saw him, and ended up working out for him so far.
So 5 years of straight college, and I know a lot of fans get worried when you hear about a player that's never played before or maybe limited amount of exposure to playing the game. Yeah, it's very few and far between that these players come about, first and foremost. But watching what he's been able to do, even considering the fact that he could be a first-round pick, I have him at number 34 on my top 36 right now, which kind of lends to that early day 2, late, round 1. So I think we're in sync there. I guess the limited amount of time that he's had to play, why 3 to 4 years do you think it would take? And are teams really willing to wait that long to see what his max ability is? Or do you just think that by then he'll be a polished product and that's as good as he's going to get?
Yeah, that's a great question. The reason we grade why we do is because that's how NFL teams look. The majority of players, if you are not contributing that second year, they're going to move on, right? We see draft prospects that don't make it very often because they just don't contribute early. But when it comes to specific, unique players, they could be a little more patient. So if you are going to develop somebody over 3 to 4 years, teams are hoping it's 3, you're also hoping that their ceiling is extremely high. You're not spending 3 to 4 years to develop a backup. You're spending 3 to 4 years to develop an impact starter. And that's what they're seeing here, because what they're hoping that they get out of years 1 through 2 is a low-end starting tackle. Maybe he's a backup for a year and then starts, and it does depend on the team. But maybe for 1 to 2 years, they're looking for a low-end starter and then develop into a high-end starter. I see a player that has all the physical tools, got much better. Those first 2 years at Los Angeles College to Arizona State were a big transition, played through injury at Arizona State. This next step, too, not only is it going to be a big step in just his professional development where he has to go against much better players, but they're also far older, savvier players all around him, both on the offense and the defense. So he should be able to get drastically better on a quicker timeline because he's around NFL coaches, NFL players. He's going to get an NFL nutrition plan to make sure he keeps up his physical ability without sacrificing any of that, again, because he has the strength, he has the speed. So all you're really doing is just trying to train those traits to translate to the next level. So he's a high potential guy. And again, with very specific players, if you think he's going to be a high-end impact player, you're willing to give him a little longer timeline.
So I guess what I'm grasping out of this is when you consider a project, teams in this use case, they would view a player like this that has obviously the freakish ability, the size, the speed, everything, but needs some refinement, some the mechanical tools, kind of refining, maybe it's his hands, maybe it's his feet, whatever it is, refining him a little bit, and then seeing him produce year after year, that he has to be showing improvement. I'm saying that because when I think of the word project, which I hear a lot about for Detroit, consistently the fan base says that Brad Holmes drafts too many projects. And I just want to ask you, I didn't ask you this earlier. So any player after round, I view all players as projects in the draft, but any player after round 2 to me typically has a great amount of project in them because less than 15% of them even start in the NFL or even play a game, and less than 3% of those 15 even become elite, after the third round or in the third round or later. So when you think of a project, isn't it, do you agree or disagree that a lot of players third round and later are projects anyway, just some have a varying degree than others, and some catch on faster than others, some get an opportunity earlier than others because of varying factors, whether it be injuries or coaching changes or a myriad of factors, right? Anyone could get drafted, and you're looking at that player. Giovanni Manu is one, freakish size, ability, agility. That's a project, right? That could be that 3-4 year project that you're talking about. Is a third round pick. Is it ever a wasted pick when you see a player like that? And where do you consider the largest amount of projects to be in the draft?
I think that teams have to balance out their current needs with what their future needs are, and that's kind of where you get the a little bit of impatience. Sometimes some teams are always looking for players that they think are going to develop, and they have to be there sooner because their team needs them. Again, when we're talking about this guy right here at the end of the first round, ideally he's going to a playoff caliber team who maybe could afford that. I wouldn't want to throw him into the fire on a bad team day one and have him set up for failure. So it really does depend on the scheme. And I would say that the project ratio is definitely more at the end of the draft, right? So rounds 1 and maybe 2, you're looking for the starters right there. Rounds 3 through like 4 and 5, you have to fill out your roster with quality special teams players and good competing backups. And you'll get some guys that'll fall for injury reasons, or they need a little time or disciplinary reasons or whatever in that area. But then the 5 through 7 rounds are where you're really trying to find that, hey, are these the guys that can outperform where we are at? So they have like that 1 or 2 traits that you're really looking for. But when you have a guy that played, at the Big 12 against top end competition, if you watch his Texas Tech film, that's his best film too. When he was going against David Bailey, he got beat 1.5 times, depending on how you kind of view it. But overall, he locked down that side and they won that game, and a big reason because he was able to hold that up. So I think, again, when you're trying to figure out what these players are going to be, you have to see what you expect teams to do with them, and that's not easy before they're drafted. If he's drafted by the Green Bay Packers, he's going to develop differently than if he's drafted by the Jacksonville Jaguars. No shade on either team necessarily, but it's going to depend what system he's in and when he's expected to develop. And sometimes first round picks don't work out, and sometimes 7th round picks do, but there's a lot of factors that roll into those outside of just their immediate developmental projection.
Absolutely. Talking offensive line here with Jeff Dean of Sports Info Solutions. Just finished up with Iheanachor. What do you think about Spencer Fano here? He looks like he's on your board at number 14 overall, 3rd tackle. There's been a few mock drafts that have slid Fano down a little bit to where he maybe could end up at 17. I don't know if that's going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen. But Spencer Fano is, correct me if I'm wrong, he's right tackle, right? He's right tackle.
Yes.
Yeah, he's right tackle. Where do you see Fano at the next level? Is he projecting as a right tackle? Could he move to the inside at guard? Given the shorter arm length there at 32 and an eighth, and I guess that's another question. I've always viewed the offensive line as 33 was the threshold, 33 and a half is gravy. Anything beyond that, well, awesome, right? But at 33 or below, you start to have some questions. Are you having that many questions at 32 and an eighth? And then does the rest of the body, the agility, and the functionality of their play have to be that much higher if they're deficient in something like arm length?
Yeah, arm length is one of those tricky things because you can find ways to kind of minimize the impact, but it gets harder the higher up in talent level you go. When he was at Utah, he's going to be facing some okay edge rushers for sure, right? He's going to have some guys, but not every single week is a game-wrecking long defender. I mean, if Myles Garrett is going to hit you 3 inches before you can reach him, that's a big disadvantage right off the bat. So at the very least, I would say I consider it a knock when I'm looking at him as a player. But the most important thing is just how they play on the field. There are players that it works out and they're not really impacted as much, and there are other players that do kick in the guard. I'm thinking of Peter Skoronsky from Northwestern a few years ago, right? He had some arm length concerns, and there was a chance he could have held on at tackle, but they moved him into guard and it ended up working out really well for the Titans offensive line. Maybe that's where they view him. Guards just aren't valued at the same level as tackles because they're a little easier to find and they have a little less responsibility in one-on-one scenarios. But finding a high-quality guard is still valuable for a team. So I think he gets a chance at tackle first. He's a really reliable player. He doesn't excel in a lot of things, but he also doesn't make a lot of mistakes. He is he's good out in space. He's good working at the second level. He has the awareness and the hand use and the finishing ability to kind of nullify some of those arm length concerns. So I think he gets a chance at tackle. I'm not surprised if he kicks on the inside, but I also don't think your team necessarily has a disadvantage if you're looking for him at a tackle capacity, if you accept some of those limitations.
Fano's a right tackle. I was having a brain fart there. I don't obviously see him going anywhere else, but if he were to go to guard, does it really matter either side? I mean, is there a benefit if you're a right tackle that you go to right guard, or if you're a right tackle, or if you're a left tackle, you go to left guard? Is there any benefit there, do you think?
Not much, but there is a slight retraining of your brain, because usually when you're on the right side of the line, you start inside and work out. So if you flip to the other side, you got to flip your head the other way. And it does take some time to get your footwork and your hand used to redirect. So you usually like to see players stay on the right side if they're on the right, just for as a little more comfortability if you expect them to start right away. But these are NFL level athletes. They're going to figure it out if you want to move him over to the left guard position.
Fano, when I was going through his sheet here on your site, stats, and then under blocking, I noticed that he had only 5 false starts throughout his entire career, which I would say that's pretty low. For most players that I've looked at, only 1 last year, only 2 holding penalties. You said he doesn't make a lot of mistakes. Clearly, the numbers back that up. From a blown blocks percentage, his numbers are pretty solid last year. Do you want to walk through that a little bit?
Yeah, so I think one of the awesome things to look at there is the progression. So in 2023, you could see he was struggling. He had 26 blown blocks of the season there, and has reduced down despite increased snap counts. He had 200 more snaps in 2025 than he did in 2023, with far fewer blown blocks. Now, again, part of that is the scheme. If anybody that's watched Utah this year, Devin Dampier gets out of the pocket a lot. They move the pocket a lot. They use a lot of counters and getting misdirection. But a lot of that is just straight up offensive line talent. They had 2 tackles that just were really good all year, and that's what he did. And then, he didn't give up a sack directly because of that. He might have given up a sack because of coverage sack or something like that. But as far as a blown block, that's 0 is perfect, and that's what we want to see out of our tackles, right? I think it was who was the offensive line prospect last year, 2 years ago, it basically said Will Campbell. If you give up 1 sack a game as a tackle, you're not playing in the league. But if you get 1 sack a game as a defensive end, you're an all-pro player. That's really the unfortunate position of playing tackle, is you really just can't make 1 mistake a game, or it'll cost you. So I really like what he brought to the run game. When they ran behind him, he was really effective at clearing the lane. They were able to get significant more yards. They had a high positive percentage. In other words, they got a above average expected run going across from him. So that's not average. That means above what we expect on those runs, 55% of the time, which is a really good percentage on there. And then you top it off, he does have the athletic ability. It's not quite the same level as a couple other players, but he has NFL level athleticism ability, and you combine all of those factors. I am very comfortable with him as a strong starter, just a notch below a couple of those other tackles we talked about.
Man, a lot of great info. I know we're kind of up against here. We're a little bit over on time, which is okay by me, but I don't want to keep you forever. If there was a few things that you really wanted to point out about this year's offensive line class, any value picks later, any of the risers, the fallers right now, I know you're still making some adjustments, obviously, before the draft kicks off. And then if you could give me your best fit for the Detroit Lions at pick 1750, and I've got one name I want to throw at you. This is a name that even popped up in the last couple of days, but I've put him on a couple of my mock drafts that I haven't sent to anybody. And that was Parker out of Duke, the tackle out of Duke. So what do you know about him? Let me see where he's ranked on your.
He is moving to center on our draft, so you have to go to the center.
Can you explain why? And he's played tackle his whole life. What is the whole center? Where's that come from? Is that what he wants to play at the next level? Is that what he's projected to play? Could you explain? It's not Parker Brailsford. It's Brian Parker II.
Parker, 110.
Yep.
Yeah, so he's right. He was right tackle this last year. He did play a little bit of left tackle, mostly right tackle. but it's where we think he's just going to find the most value at his team. So it's not saying that we absolutely don't believe he can be something else, but this is where we feel like he fits best. He did play that in high school, so one thing to keep in mind is he does have a lot of experience at that. You could move him out to right tackle in a pinch if you really need. That's kind of why he gets that 6'2", which is a multi-positional backup grade. We do think he's valuable at multiple positions, but because of his kind of ability to work in a zone scheme and work to the second level cleanly, we like that in his setter capacity. He's a hair under the arm length requirement, but the heavy feet are the main reason for moving him on the inside. We talked about Kadyn Proctor having slightly heavy feet where he could get beat. Somebody like Brian Parker got beat a lot more than he did, and that won't get better at the next level because he doesn't have the athleticism to overcompensate for that. So he's an anchor guy that's disciplined. He's more of that just go and do your job type of guy, but he's not going to overwhelm you with athleticism and his hand use and his footwork, which are the two of the biggest keys at almost any position on the field, but especially offensive line. We're just not up to what we wanted to see out of that. So we like him better as a center. He's kind of that broad chest. He's a bigger center too, but it doesn't mean he can't do it. It's also another Duke guy, but Graham Barton, we said could have played all 5 positions on the offensive line and kicked in the interior, and that's where we liked him best and just has been a great fit there. So don't be surprised if Brian Parker follows in his footsteps either.
It's interesting. So I, initially I was looking at him as a late, I want to say it was round five pickup. It might have been as a tackle, as someone that I thought maybe could, come in and be a swing, but if he has opportunity at center, and I did watch his high school tape, so I want to say it's linked somewhere in here that I got to his high school tape, or maybe it wasn't in here, maybe it was somewhere else. But I did watch exactly what you're saying, where he did play center in high school, and I thought, man, he bulldozed guys, and that was just high school, but he bulldozed guys. He consistently put him into the ground. All right, last couple here. We'll go back to the big board. I know we didn't talk about Lomu or who else? Nwane. What is your thought process on Olavivega Nione? Is he going to go, early enough in this to where maybe the Lions don't have a chance? And do you think that the Lions would take a guard here? If he was the best overall player on the board at pick 17 and Kadyn Proctor was on the board at 17 still, where do you think the Lions would go? Or if Blake Miller and Monroe Freeling were on the board altogether, where do you think the Lions would go? I would really like to get your idea here on Nione and Monroe Freeling. Anything else you want to talk about that you have time left to do? What is your thought process on those guys?
Sure. Well, first off, I'm always a best player available type of guy. I think you build a football roster by consistently finding the best players. Even if you think you might need another position more, it doesn't mean you can't work something to make it work. There are a lot of very smart people at the NFL, at the coaching staffs and the players. They will find a way. So you can see Ione is our number one guard. He's our only one above a 6'5". So we think he is a really good guard.
It's a rock star.
Yeah, he is going to produce immediately in the run game, and our one-liner about him, and he can mirror players. Little things too that kind of are nice factors is he's got 10.5-inch hands. Now, what that means, we talked about arm length keeping guys off you, but if you have big hands, it is easier to grab players. So all positions we like big hands, but offensive linemen are a really good one. You want pancake smackers where you can just get everybody away from you. That's what he brings. But I mean, critical factors 6'6" means he is good at the 3 biggest things that we think make a guard. He is going to win at the NFL with all those. He doesn't have a lot of weaknesses. His awareness is just sufficient. We weren't, thrilled with some of his ability, but his overall physical attributes, his dominance as a run and pass blocker, and his experience in operating that pro-style scheme at Penn State is going to make him a really good guard. I absolutely think the Lions have a chance to get him at that position. Guards aren't quite as valuable, so even the best ones tend to not always go higher, especially if you want to put somebody like a Proctor or a Fano at the guard position too. That would knock his value down a little bit because now you have teams that are looking for that. So he is really just the guard of this draft. He's definitely our number one guard. It wasn't even that close. We liked his ability. He had really low blown block percentage as a pass blocker, and as a run blocker was still pretty good, which is based on the scheme and how Penn State performed this year was impressive given his lack of supporting cast around him. But I think that would be a great pick for the Lions. If you're going with any of the tackles at that position, I think you'd be, if again, according to our board, if Proctor falls there, that's where I would go. But I wouldn't want to reach on a developmental guy for somebody you expect to come in right away too. So, Monroe Freeling is really an interesting prospect. He's a guy that's always a classic late riser in this process, but I would, we have him as our 40th overall player now, and he might go up or down a few, but we think that there are at least 5 tackles better than him in this draft. And so at that position, that's not where I would go. If you wanted to trade down and potentially, sacrifice, or get a little extra capital and then maybe target him later, that's where I would go. But he's a big potential guy too. That's, we talk about some of the other players that have boomer bust potential. This is another one. His athleticism is borderline rare. You do not find players with that size that move that fast, that have that strong of a lower body. And again, we talked about arm length and hand size, and he has that in spades.
He's definitely one of the bigger. He's definitely one of the bigger. He's one of the bigger prospects out there from a length perspective. He's tall. He's lanky. He's got the hands. He's got the arms. But it's the weight and the anchor. You mentioned he has a good strong anchor. But when I watch his tape, I always feel like he's a little bit light, like he gets moved around a little bit. I attribute that to his pad height more than anything. Do you see the same thing with his pad height being a little bit too high, or how would you evaluate that?
Yeah, that's a great distinction. So when I'm talking about his strength, I'm talking about kind of his natural raw strength.
Yep.
How that actually translate on the field is not evident. He can't, we look at his weakness, his power is a 4. Mm-hmm. He doesn't drive that through because he plays high. Mm-hmm. He gets, one of our top weaknesses, I love the expression lungy at times. He reaches out, he doesn't play balanced, and that's kind of tough. So that athletic ability is tough to find. We still think he's a low-end starter early in his career. You're gonna find mistakes in his game, but he will have some highlight plays. But again, if you are looking for somebody that's going to come in day one and just you don't have to worry about, that's not necessarily the prospect for him. And then finally, he has a moderate injury risk. Slight worry if you're going to reach on a player, which I wouldn't recommend in the first place. You want to make sure that they're going to play. If you have a lot of injury concerns on those players, it's a little bit worrying.
So he only has 18 starts, and that was another big thing for me when evaluating, him against everybody else is when I look at a player that has, north of 30 starts, I mean, a couple of seasons worth, I think that's head and shoulders above a guy that's, barely played. Well, I mean, it is a full season at the college rank, unless you're, even going into the playoffs there in the college football playoff the way that it is now. If you're getting to 15, 16, games a season, that's about it, right? So 18 starts. Compare that to someone with 40. I don't know that I would take that risk. And when I look at a guy like Proctor, who has the amount of starts that he has and played for the school that he did, I think they're head and shoulder. They're two totally different types of players. I do like Monroe Freeling's athleticism. I think he moves around great. And for whatever reason, Daniel Jeremiah and others have continually mocked Monroe Freeling to the Lions. And I've just never seen it. But hey, I've been wrong many times in my life before. But I'm glad that you kind of see some similarity here, that, there's some things to worry about. The high pads, that he can get in trouble with, especially at the next level. They're going to take advantage of that, big time, easy. So anything else you want to say about Monroe Freeling?
No, just, kind of what we were talking about, though. This is a guy that don't be surprised if he does go in the first round, because teams just, again, look for the stuff they can't teach, because everybody believes they can teach everything else. So with that height and athleticism, you're not going to find those every day, but they think they can find that hand use hiding in the back somewhere. So, I'm not surprised if he goes in round 1. And again, his upside is legitimate. There's a chance he ends up being a dominant player, but there is significant risk that comes with him. And, with some of the other players at that position, that's where I would probably lean away from him.
All right, I'm gonna end with this. I don't want to keep you on forever. I'm gonna end with this. I'm gonna give you 3 or 4 names here, and you tell me first round, second round, or third round. You don't have to tell me why, but right now I see one of my favorites in this draft is Jake Slaughter. I absolutely love his game. I love everything about this guy. But at rank 96 and projected somewhere in the third round, where does he end up? First, second, or third round? Doubtful first, but where do you think he ends up?
The third round.
Third round, okay. Connor Lew, another one that when I look at what happened with Seth McLaughlin, who ended up going undrafted due to injury, and I've seen Connor Lew as high as like 45 at the very beginning of this, off season, maybe January. He's been consistently dropping back. Does he get drafted?
Yeah, I think so. Centers are always a tricky breed. People don't like to value them highly. They think that you could find starting level centers in third or fourth round. That's why, teams don't want to reach for them too often unless you have a really tough to find prospect like Linderbaum. And so, I think he gets drafted. He's still a very young guy, right? He's only a third-year player compared to some of those others you're seeing right there. So, like, Slaughter's a fifth-year guy. Lou has the size. He's a starting center. He just has no position flexibility, which limits kind of that upside. You could find centers that can play guard. He's not necessarily one of those guys at the next level.
So you think he gets drafted? Obviously, we don't know where because of the injury. Another good one, Austin Barber, another fifth-year senior, has great size. Where does he go?
Yeah, we have him at 105, which would put him very into the third or the fourth. I think he probably gets a slight bump, given again his size and kind of his power. I would say though, I still see him as just a third round pick. I don't think he goes above the third round, not with the depth at a couple other positions.
All right. I know some of the Lions fans have been talking about Travis Burke recently. I don't really know enough about him. My biggest risk is, anytime you have a guy that's 6'9", it seems like they end up washing out a lot sooner than other players because of the height and what it does to their joints. Anything you could add here for a very, very late pick for any team out there looking at Travis Burke?
Travis Burke, the main thing you're looking for is kind of that frame and tenacity. He's a tough guy. Finalized this report, so I did get several games of film on him, but there is a lot of tough reps for him that he does not function as well. He doesn't move super well. And again, that pad level just naturally high on top of it. He is not really strong. He could fill out a roster for sure. Again, we have him as, a backup one position player. But there is he's probably close to his ceiling as a fifth-year player that just isn't going to get a lot better with his athleticism or anything like that. His teammate actually put on 50 pounds or 40 pounds postseason and looks like a totally different player in a way worse way. So it's never just a surefire straight line on what the best course of action is to take.
Wow. 50 pounds in the offseason.
Yeah, Chris Adams. He was a super athletic guard for them. And he put on, he weighed 277. So to be fair, he needed weight, but he went up to like 315 or something, 311 on his pro day. And now the report looks like it doesn't match him at all because he looked so bad at that weight. We'll have to figure out exactly what's going on with him. He might have to get removed from the site with that added weight. That was not good.
Wow, that's not good at all. Man, it has been an absolute pleasure. Obviously, you can see these could go forever. I mean, just trying to get all these players in and kind of give, a lot of opportunity to talk about each player. If you were to surmise all of this up for the offensive line, I know you said at the beginning it's kind of a light class compared to years past. You think there's 5 going in the first round, 5 offensive linemen, 5 tackles going in total potentially?
I think probably up to seven total with 1 guard, six tackles because I'm looking at that Mauigoa, Proctor, Fano, Iheanachor, Lomu, Blake Miller I think does go, and I think Freeling or Iheanachor probably go, and then whatever one doesn't probably goes in the top 3 picks of the next round too. So I would say probably 8 in the first 35 picks is where I would go.
Well, when we have Mr. Cooper on, maybe we do the back half of the offensive line and get his ideas there. Man, it's been an absolute pleasure having you on today. Appreciate all of your time. And sportsinfosolutions.com. Please check it out today. NFL draft.sportsinfosolutions.com. Get all of your player insights there. Anything you want to leave us with? Any closing statements on the day?
We are almost at one of the best times of the year, so just excited, and hopefully everybody else watching this is too, because even if your team drafts somebody different than you expect, it's still just a really fun process from start to finish, and we get to start it all again the day after the draft.
Man, the day after, I mean, the Monday after, it starts all over again. Well, this is Will Rock. That is Jeff Dean, and this has been an offensive line breakdown. Jeff, pause for 3 seconds or 30 seconds. I'll be right with you when we're done. Hope you all enjoyed it. We'll be back for more tomorrow morning on the Rise and Grind Morning Show. And that's it for the offensive line breakdown. You guys have a wonderful day. Take care and go One Pride, and we'll see you in the next one.
Pressured by Hutchinson, he goes down again.